This video is intended to give a brief introduction to the verification process here at the University of Alabama and to review all of the documents that would be needed in order to complete the standard verification. The Department of Education does select the applications that will go through this verification process. Once your student has completed the FAFSA, they will receive an email from the Department of Education notifying them that the FAFSA has been processed. In that email, there should be a link for something called a student aid report. That student aid report will give the student an estimate of an award, so what they can expect to be offered. We'll also let them know if there have been any errors on the application, anything that needs to go back and be corrected, and it should notify the student at that point if they've been selected for the verification process. These applications are selected just to verify that the information has been entered correctly. Once you have been selected for the verification process, the student cannot be awarded until that verification process is complete. For the standard dependent verification, both the parents and the student will be required to submit documents. The first thing that parents need to submit is the 2-page institutional verification form. It does have to have physical signatures. Electronic signatures will not be accepted. Please be sure to print off the forms and sign them before submitting them to our office. In addition to that 2-page institutional verification form, we need all W-2s for either the parent listed on the FAFSA or both parents that are listed on the FAFSA for whatever tax year is required on the application. In the past, we have been able to accept 1040s, so just your standard tax return, as documentation for verification. However, that's no longer the case. Now you must submit what is called a tax return transcript. Those transcripts do have to be requested from the IRS, and there is information attached to the verification form about how to request that transcript from the IRS. Please be sure that when you're requesting it, that you don't accidentally request a tax account transcript. We do on occasion get those in instead, and that is not acceptable documentation. If you would prefer to make a correction to the FAFSA instead of requesting the tax transcript from the IRS, then there is the potential that you could be eligible to use what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. When you log in to make the correction, on the financial information tab is where you would be asked if you wanted to retrieve that data directly from the IRS. Not everyone is eligible for it, so if it's not showing that as an option, then that may be why. They've determined for whatever reason that you're not eligible to use that tool. In that case, the only other option would be to submit the tax return transcript. If at the point we're initially requesting these documents and your taxes have not been filed, we do just have to wait until that's been completed, with the exception being once we get past the deadline to file. So once we're past April 15th, if you've still not filed your taxes at that point, but you did file an extension, then we can accept the extension as documentation in place of that tax return transcript. We do still need all of the W-2s, and if you are self-employed, there is an additional document that we would request. We can take the Form 4868 if the taxes have not been filed at that time. The documentation for the student is identical. Still need that 2-page institutional verification form. This is not separate, it's the same form. If you need to find any of these forms on our website, financialaid.ua.edu, you can just click on this button here that says Forms. Be sure to locate the correct academic year. And then these would be just the standard dependent or independent verification forms with some additional forms listed below. If we look at the dependent student verification form, at the top, you'll just fill in the student information. Section 1 is an area that we very often see errors. This section is supposed to include all members in the household, and I think very often it's misunderstood simply because this initial line does already have the college filled in, and so it gets translated as only needing to list the people in the household that are also in college. That's not the case. As it states here, you'll want to list anyone that the parents provide more than half of the support for from July of the current year to June of the following year. So this would need to include parents as well. Section 2, both the parents and students will fill in this untaxed income information if it is available. And then Section 4 very often gets overlooked or misunderstood as well. This is the non-tax filer portion of the form, and it should only be signed by anyone who has not and will not file taxes. In this case, if the student were a non-tax filer, they did not have any intentions of filing a tax return, they would need to be sure to sign here. They would still include any sources of income that they had and also attach their W-2s from any income earned, even if they did not file taxes. If either parent or both parents happened to not file, then they would sign here as well. Again, still being sure to submit W-2s and to indicate any earned income. And the very last section of the form is just the certification. So this is where we need the physical signatures for both the parent and the student. In addition to that form, of course, we do also need the student's W-2s for whatever tax year was required on the FAFSA. And we do as well need their tax return transcript. The student also has the option to go in and make that correction to the FAFSA and use the IRS data retrieval tool as long as they're eligible for it. But if they're not for some reason, we would need that tax return transcript. Independent students would be those students that are not required to submit their parental information on the FAFSA application. For independent students, the verification requirements, the documentation is the same. Still need the 2-page institutional verification form with signatures, except now the signatures are going to be the students and their spouse if they have a spouse. All W-2s for both the student and the spouse from the tax year that's required on the FAFSA, and then tax return transcripts as well. There are several ways that documents can be submitted to our office once they've been collected. Our primary recommendation would be sending them via email. You can send them to financialaid@ua.edu. You can also send them by fax or by mail. But however you choose to send them, it's just vitally important that the student's campus-wide ID number be on each document that is submitted. That just helps ensure that those documents do remain together, that they are submitted correctly, and that verification process can be as smooth as possible. All verification documents get routed to our data processing department or our verification department for processing. Once you've submitted those documents to our office, be sure to monitor the student's MyBama account for any updates. If there is anything that's considered incomplete in the documents, that will be noted on the student's MyBama account. The student should also receive notification via email that it's incomplete. And if there are any questions about what is incomplete for verification, please contact our office so that we can clarify what's needed in order to satisfy that requirement. On the MyBama account, you'll notice a red flag for that unmet requirement or that incomplete requirement. Once it's satisfied, it will turn green. And if there are no other outstanding requirements for the student, then that should make them eligible to receive an award offer. That might, though, depend on the timing that it's completed, whether or not we're actually able to offer an award. Entering freshmen, transfer students, any first-time students, the soonest that they can be awarded is usually around the beginning of April. And returning students can't be awarded until typically late June. And that is just because we're waiting on budgets to be updated before we can do that. I mentioned at the beginning that this was just basic verification. So if you were selected only for dependent verification or independent verification and there were no other outstanding trackings on the student's account, These would be the only documents that would need to be submitted. But there are some additional verification forms that are asked for that don't require any additional documents to be requested from an outside entity, but they are just institutional forms. All of those forms can be found on our website, financialaid.ua.edu. Once again, here's our contact information. This does also include our office hours. We are available to meet with Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:45 p.m. No appointment necessary. We can be reached via email, and we do also have a 24-hour call center. So our call center will answer your questions based on the notes that are on the account. They will definitely do their best to give you the most complete and accurate information. But if at any point you feel like you need to speak with someone in our office, just request that through our call center. They'll send the call over to us and we will get back with you as soon as possible.